Hey there, bootstrappers. Some of you may know, many of you probably don't, that my husband and I are huge Disney fans. And so we take a trip to Disney at least once a year. And we just got back right before Christmas, a week before Christmas. And I learned a lot of lessons. I always do every time I go to Disney. You know, Disney is the #1 brand in the entire world. And so there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from them. And I wanted to share some of them with you. I just thought it was fitting that maybe as I share a few of these lessons from our Disney trip that I sport some of my assortment of ears. And so anyway, the first one that I wanted to share with you is this. You know, we're focusing a lot around here on habits and on good, healthy habit formation and how that provides the foundation for our business. Not just for our businesses, but for our spiritual growth and our relationships and all things. Really, we have a combination of our habits. And this was something that really was driven home to me during this last trip at Disney, because we have always had just an absolutely magical trip every time we've gone. Now, it may be that a small annoyance might occur here and there. It usually has nothing to do with Disney themselves. It usually has to do with maybe some other guests in the park who are maybe not behaving in a particularly great way. But it's always minor. I couldn't even tell you most of the time what it might have been, because it's so minor that it doesn't really affect our trip. Now, on this most recent trip, we actually did have a few things go wrong, and they were on Disney. And so it almost pains me to say that, because it's never happened before. But here is the truth of all of our businesses, right? We are human. We are operated by humans. We are going to make mistakes. There are things that are going to go wrong. It's not a question of if something's going to go wrong. It's a question of when. You're going to drop a ball, you're going to make a mistake, something's going to occur that's going to leave you with a less than happy client in that moment or in an instant. It doesn't have to be that way, and it doesn't have to stay that way long term. So you have to ask yourself, how am I going to handle it in that moment? But it goes so much more beyond handling it in that moment. It goes back to what is the habit of your business. And typically the habit of your business, in terms of how you treat customers, how you deal with client issues, is going to be in your policies, in your procedures, in your perspective on those clients, right? So for Disney, everybody is a guest, and all of their team are cast members, and Disney is basically a stage, right? You're immersed in story, fantastically immersed in story. And so I'm going to share, there were actually 2 or 3 little issues on this trip, which has never happened to us before. Never. And it was exacerbated by the fact that, we've gotten spoiled the last couple of years that we've gone, because we've gone in December, and the weather in Orlando is a roll of the dice in December. You never know what you're going to get. You could be getting summer, you could be getting winter, you may get both, and it might switch back and forth. In December of 2017, the day we arrived, it was 85 degrees. The next day, it was 42. So, and having lived in Central Florida, we know to prepare for that. But we've gotten used to some pretty good weather the last few trips. And so we're not used to a lot of mugginess and humidity in December. It usually lets up a little bit in Florida in December on the humidity, even if you have some heat. But it was muggy, and it was kind of miserable for us, actually. And that's not on Disney, right? That's just the weather. But it kind of put us in a lower mood than we might normally have been in. And so one of the other things that happened is we were at Disney Springs. When we go to Disney, we drive, we park at our resort, and then we take Disney transportation everywhere, so that we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to, it's just much easier to do things that way, much less hassle, a lot more stress-free. And so we had gone to Disney Springs. Now, we stay at Port Orleans Riverside when we go. It's our favorite resort. We've stayed at other places, but we keep coming back to that one as our favorite. And they have a boat that goes to Disney Springs. So we took the boat to Disney Springs. We were there to have dinner. We had a reservation, and we stopped at the souvenir pin trading post, looked at pins, and we bought a special limited edition Funko. Now, these Funkos, in fact, I'm going to show you what it is we thought we were buying in that moment, was this Disney Skyliner Pop Funko, because the Disney Skyliner debuted in the end of September of just this past year. And it's a way to get from some of the resorts to some of the parks and back and forth in between Epcot and Hollywood Studios. And so we do collect Pop Funkos, and we were kind of excited that they had a Skyliner Funko. They were stacked up behind the counter, and they were stacked up behind some other park exclusive Funkos for the Matterhorn Bobsled, which is a ride at Disneyland. We have not been to Disneyland yet, and not having ever ridden Matterhorn or been there, we weren't interested in that particular Funko. So the cast member put everything in the bag for us. It was raining cats and dogs. We had our ponchos on. She said, I'm going to double bag this for you so it doesn't get wet. So when she turned around and reached from the stacks, we didn't pay attention. We just assumed she had grabbed the Skyliner Funko because that's what we had asked for. And they're exactly the same size. And so we went back to the resort. We had the bags doubled up. We put it to the side. Didn't think about it again until the night before our last day, as I was like, okay, we have to kind of start getting things together and packing to go home. And I opened the bag. I pulled out the double bag, and it was the wrong Pop Funko. And when we were there, it had been a couple of days since we had been to Disney Springs at that point. There had only been 17 left at the time. And if you know anything about Funkos and Funko collection, I was concerned there would not be any more. But most importantly, I didn't have time at that point. I didn't have time to go back to Disney Springs and try to exchange it. And so I called the guest relations, and they weren't able to reach anybody in that particular retail establishment at Disney Springs. They could see in their system there were some left, but they said, if you were to go down there, we can't guarantee they'd be there by the time that you get there. So we're going to suggest that you go down to the concierge desk at the lobby and let them know what's going on and see if they can help you more, beyond what I can do for you over the phone. And so I did that. And all of this took some time. So it took me about an hour to resolve. Now, thankfully, the resort did send one of their runners to Disney Springs. They got the right Funko, and they just came and brought it and put it in our room for us, because we actually had an after hours event that night that we had to be at, which is why we did not have time to go back to Disney Springs and exchange it ourselves. And this is not, oddly enough, as much time as I've spent telling the story, this is not about the fact that Port Orleans sent a runner to go get the right thing and delivered it right to our room. I'm glad they did that. It was a fantastic way to handle it. I appreciate that. I appreciate how they owned the situation and made it right. Disney has always done that. What this is about is the fact that they not only handled that in a way that left us pleased with the resolution, but there were some other things that happened in this trip, and I'm not going to rehash them. It doesn't matter. It's not the point. The point is this. At a certain point in the trip, it was enough of a different experience for us than normal. We started to have the conversation of whether or not we should continue to come every year or make it an every other year trip. And in retrospect, it really had a lot to do with our moods at the time as well. But when you're in that wrong mood and something goes wrong, you know how much that can exacerbate things. And while it might not be your fault as the business when that happens with one of your clients, it still affects you all the same. But because Disney is Disney, and because they are so focused on the guest experience, on either side of these things happening, and on either side of our lower mood, because it wasn't a bad mood, we were still at Disney, but on either side of our lower mood, it's Disney being Disney that saved it. It's Disney being Disney that turned our conversation, because Disney's habitual guest experience focus is what gave us our very last day there. It was almost like every single interaction we had, everything that happened, it was just filled with that quintessential Disney magic. So many different things, one right after the other. It was just literally the most perfect day. And that's not because we were at Magic Kingdom our last day. That's not because anybody at Magic Kingdom knew what had happened with us. That's not because anybody at Magic Kingdom knew about the 3 glitches of our trip, or the fact that we weren't thrilled with the weather. it wasn't because of any of that. It's because they have a habit and a practice of focusing on that guest experience and on that guest in front of them and making magic happen. And this is something that they have cultivated, this culture, they've cultivated this through their training and through their policies. They've done this intentionally. So what the habits of their employees are, what they've been trained to do, what they've been empowered to do, what they've been taught to do, it's those habits that really overshadowed any glitch that could have occurred on our vacation. Because we know after 5 years of continuous trips, as a non-local now, we know what the expectation is. So those 5 years of trips leading up to this one, where we'd had so much Disney magic, and then ending on that note, it's the culmination of those habits, the culmination of their good practices that Steward saved the day. And at the end of the day, we were sad to leave again, and we're like, oh gosh, now we're leaving and we don't want to, when a few days earlier we'd been like, maybe it's time to go home. And so I just want to, if you have one takeaway today, it's what you do on the daily. It's what the normal experience is with you that matters so much more than the glitches that happen. How you handle them matters. But what habits are you building in your business? Whether you have a team, if you're here, you're likely a solopreneur. That's what most of us are. What habits have you built into your business that are going to save the day on the other side when you inevitably have something go wrong? What are you doing to make sure that your routine, your policies, your procedures are so focused on the best interests and the delight of your clients that when you do have that hiccup, it's not going to matter because of the habits that you've built on either side of that? And can any of you relate? Have any of you had an experience like I described with our Disney trip over the years, or even on a shorter term, where there's a business where the inevitable has happened, a mistake has happened, something's gone awry, but it didn't matter, and it didn't matter because of the consistency of the experience on either side of that anomaly? And how can you see how the habits of that business contributed to that? I would love to hear your stories that are similar.